Welcome to Season 4 of the Changing Earth podcast with Sara F. Hathaway, blending survival fiction and fact to bring you entertaining education that will help you dream, survive, and thrive. And now, here's your host, Sara F. Hathaway.
Hello and welcome to the Changing Earth podcast. This is episode number 154, Season 4, Episode 30. So we're getting deep into the book now, and I am working hard on my next book to try and get it ready so that we don't miss a beat as soon as the podcast comes to a close. Hopefully we'll be ready to pick up with the next book, and you guys will have lots of great reading material for the future. So I'm working on that very diligently. Today I want to jump right into the podcast. Last week on our podcast, we, Bennett and Erika had this disagreement. Erika spent a nice day with Dexter and Vince, just kind of relaxing. And then they got loaded up, went back to Reno, and reunited with the family. This week, we're going to go through some of the stories of what happened with different individuals while everyone was separated. And we're going to be discussing how to survive the loss of a loved one. And when I recorded this episode, it was before I experienced my own personal loss of a loved one. And so definitely a weird situation. But Blake Alma is here with us today, and he is going to be talking about, in an SHTF situation, how are we going to handle dealing with the loss of life that we will probably experience at that point. If everything, that has been forecasted comes true whenever we experience a collapse, then how do we deal with that? But also after the show, I want to share with you some of the tidbits and tips that we've picked up along the way. And actually, my mother-in-law encouraged me to share a lot of this information with my audience so that you guys would be more prepared if you experience a loss of a loved one nowadays. So I put together, another blog to accompany this show that deals with surviving the loss of a loved one in our current society. So that's a lot of fun. I guess so. It is what it is, and it's good information that you need to know to be prepared for that event. So stick around with me after we're done with the interview because I have some more great information for you there. I also want to remind you that you can become a contributor to the Changing Earth podcast if you head on over to www.patreon.com/Changing Earth. And I've got lots of great goodies, audio clips that I don't put in the podcast. I share there. The Las Vegas years episode, part 1 and 2 is available there. So that book's been a ton of fun to work on, actually, because, the stories are already there. I already told the story in Without Land, so now I get to weave a new plot, like on top of the plot that already exists. So that's been a ton of fun, and I've heard some great feedback on both part 1 and 2. So a lot of fun. So head on over there, become a contributor. You can do that for as little as $3 a month and get access to that information. And I would definitely appreciate your contribution so we can keep the wheels rolling on the Changing Earth podcast. So head on over www.patreon.com/Changing Earth and become a contributor. So without any further ado, we're ready to jump right into this podcast. Let's go ahead and listen to Chapter 30 of Battle for the South. Chapter 30. The afternoon heat compressed the air in the tent, and the stifling atmosphere awoke Erika. She was the only one left in the sleeping area. She jumped up, eager to see her family. She was met with happy faces around the table. Trucker was there, wagging his tail. After saying good morning, Erika asked, "Where's Jack?" "Jack didn't make it, Mom. He protected me until the end," Daniel said sadly. "I'm sorry, little man." Erika felt bad for bringing it up. "I miss him, and Gage, and Jared, and Brendan," he commented solemnly. "I'm so sorry we weren't there, Daniel," Erika cried, hugging him tightly. The family looked on with tears in their eyes. They couldn't stay away. Everyone bound together in a giant hug, and nobody wanted to let go. "Get over here, guys," Star called Johnny and Megan over. There was a lot of pain that needed to be released. Megan had lost her whole family. She was the only refugee that had been adopted by the Moore family that survived to make it to safety. Johnny was battling his own demons and needed support right now more than ever. Let's go get some food and then we can talk. I'm starved, Vince said, step-siding the conversation that they needed to have. He wanted his parents involved in it. Dexter and Johnny excused themselves after the meal. They needed to go check in and had already heard the story of what happened up north anyhow. When Vince and Erika returned with Star, Megan, and Daniel to the tent, Kay and Earl had come home early. Everyone at their respective places of work understood why they wanted to leave and covered for them. With everyone together, Vince said, "Do you guys want to talk about what happened?" Daniel looked down. "Not really," he told his dad. "It's okay, Daniel," Grandma Kay said to him. "We need to talk and share our feelings. It's a good thing." "It's okay, buddy. We're all here together," Erika assured him, hugging him tightly. He pushed away a little and said, "Yeah, but you weren't there then. You weren't there." He paused and looked down. Erika was just about to say something when he started talking again. Grandma Kay and Vanessa were in the kitchen canning jam. Gage and I were with Kristen, the tutor, in the family room. Jack started growling at the door and we heard someone on the landing. 2 men in black burst in through the doors, pointing their guns at us. Grandma called Jack to her so they wouldn't hurt him. They put us all in the family room. The guy that was supposed to be watching us was looking out the window with his partner. I saw the soldier's sidearm and told Jack to get him. Jack did it, and I grabbed his gun. But the man at the door shot Jack. I shot the man at the door in his neck, but the man that Jack had bitten sprayed bullets from his gun across the room. Grandma was with me standing behind him as he shot them, so I pulled the trigger and shot him in the back of the head, Daniel explained with tears in his eyes. "He killed my friends," Daniel sobbed. Megan was sitting on the outside of the family group. She cried as she listened to the story of her mom and brother being murdered. Kay went and held the girl tightly while she mourned for her lost family members. "Grandma was freaking out," Daniel continued, "but you guys taught me what to do. I grabbed my pack and told Grandma to get some clothes while I got food. We peeked out the window. There were more soldiers in the field, so we snuck out the back and hid in the woods." Megan spoke to the group next, choking back tears. "They did kill them all. We were all in the field and they opened fire on us like target practice. My dad jumped in front of me when they shot. He landed on top of me and told me I shouldn't move." Kay patted her gently on the shoulder, encouraging her to continue. "He told me we would play dead until the soldiers left. He died while we were waiting." She lost control at that point and couldn't talk anymore. "I was at work when a client who lived down south came into town and told us about the invasion. Cole Burgess was in town as well. He received news that the base had already been overrun by the feds, so he took my car and headed directly to the farm. It was empty. There weren't even guards at the gates. As we drove past the fields, we found Megan running towards us. She was in shock. Her father was dead. Then we went to the house. Daniel already told you about what happened there, but we couldn't find Kay or Daniel. We drove out to the trails, and there were 2 soldiers out there. As they approached the vehicle, Cole shot them both. We went into the woods a few yards and called for Kay and Daniel. They were there. We all piled into the car and drove through the back trail. We didn't dare go back into town. We drove north, ahead of the federal forces' invasion. Cole had a place where we could get through the wall. Daniel's the one who made sure we had a tent and some clothes. That boy of yours saved my wife. Then he says, "Come on, Grandpa, this is the way the Moore team does it." Daniel smiled a little at the praise. "Well, it is the way we do it, Grandpa. You don't get to live too long in one place if you're not locked in. And sometimes," he paused for a moment, "sometimes bad people make you have to do bad things or they will hurt the people you love. Mom taught me, you can't hesitate. I'm just glad you guys are okay. I'm so sorry more of you didn't make it here. I know how much you love Vanessa, Mom." Vince acknowledged. "Like a daughter," Kay responded with tears in her eyes. "Thank God we have Megan," she said, holding the teenage girl. "We'll take care of her like our own." Erika was horrified by the story. How could this happen in the United States of America, she wondered. The conversations fractured. Erika doted over Daniel, checking out his latest paintings. They were bright and beautiful. Vince sat with Earl, quietly watching his family. "They were looking for you and Erika, Vince," Earl told him quietly. Our farm was one of the first targets. I don't think they had intentions of shooting any of the people in the house, or they would have right away. They were looking for you, and were willing to take your family as a bargaining chip. We've got to get the family out of here, he worried. And go where, Dad? There's no place we can go they won't find us. Trust me, we've been all around this country, Vince reflected. Did Star tell you about the next quake that is on the way? She did. A scientist said this? Earl questioned the validity of the forecast. He predicted the first one too, Vince defended. Earl wasn't convinced. It's not worth taking the risk of it hitting while we're in the path of that wave, Dad. You don't want to see that wave. I made diamonds in my butt crack when we made it out of California. Trust me, it's not something you can run from, Vince told him. Then why don't we leave now, Vince? Go north, Earl begged him. We have 3 weeks to get ready to infiltrate Vegas and get some key mercs out, plus Erika's mom and Greg and Penny's family. Then we can discuss our next move, Vince informed him. What? Why do you guys have to do this? Earl wondered. His son and daughter-in-law weren't soldiers. Because, Dad, we know the facility better than anyone. We lived there for 9 years. We have to get Nancy, and we have to get these key people out before the mercenary army attacks. Otherwise, they may be executed when the first shots are fired, Vince explained. Just you and Erika, he wondered. And Dex and Star, Vince told him. Earl's eyes were on Erika and Daniel laughing together. I can't stop you from doing what you think is right, but I don't have to like it. What are you going to tell Daniel, he wondered. The truth. His grandma is in there. Carmen and Crystal are like a brother and sister to him. He'll understand, Vince assured his father. He'll understand, but I doubt he's going to like it very much either, Earl told his son. I think you're right, Vince admitted, watching Daniel tease Erika. Vince was elated to have his family back. After Vegas, I'm done, he told himself. This disagreement over Vince and Erika's role in the resistance movement is not one that's going to go away anytime soon, and it becomes kind of this underlying issue within the family. So we'll have to see how that plays out, both in Battle for the South and in the new book, hint, hint. The main underlying story of this chapter is dealing with the loss of loved ones. So Megan experienced the loss of her whole family and watched that happen in front of her eyes. And that, is a super traumatic event. So here to talk to us today about surviving the loss of a loved one is Blake Alma. Blake Alma is the author of many books, one of them being Art of an Outdoorsman. He's an award-winning writer, TV, and radio host, and published author. He is also the founder and editor at The Art of an Outdoorsman and the editor-in-chief at Survivalist Daily. He hosts and produces the Outdoorsman Art radio show and The Outdoor Experience on Hunt Channel. Blake loves and pursues the outdoors and its creator with all that he has. Some of Blake's favorite outdoor activities include survival, trapping, hunting, fishing, and camping. If you want to learn more about Blake, head on over to www.blakealma.com. That's www.blakealma.com. Alma is spelled A-L-M-A, so it's blakealma.com. So let's go ahead and welcome Blake to the show. Today, I am honored to have Blake Alma back on the show. Blake, you are tearing it up. Thank you so much for coming back on the show with me.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. Thanks a lot.
Well, it was my pleasure, my pleasure. So it's been a while since the other show aired, so hopefully you've got even more good stuff going on now that we will have to go over to your website and check it out, see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just BlakeAlma.com.
Perfect. Nice and easy. That's what I should have done with mine.
Yep, just BlakeAlma.com, I used to have this super sophisticated email. It was like @gmail.com. Now it's just super simple now. Just try to make it simple for everybody.
Yep, that's what I learned through the process as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you what though, this what we're going to be talking about today is far from simple though. It's pretty complex stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at this point in my story, a lot of bad stuff has gone down, and the Moore family had adopted this family of refugees, and Megan is the only one who survived. And and her world is just gone, just been stripped away from her. And, you know, for me, just thinking about coping with loss, it's a really difficult thing to fathom at this point in my life, and I couldn't imagine, like, going through an SHTF scenario. So let's talk a little bit about just, you know, emotions that people are going to be experiencing either way.
Yeah. You know, I mean, when you're in a survival situation, things could work out great, you know, but, you know, things could take a turn. You know, a bad hand could happen. So, you know, you could be the most knowledgeable survivalist in the world, you know everything there is about survival, but boom, let's say something happens to a loved one and they die, you know.
Yeah.
Were you ready for that? I doubt it. You know, you cannot prepare yourself enough for a situation of that magnitude, you know. And so, you know, there's no graduation day as a survivalist. You know, you can always learn more and more. And I think this is one of the toughest things about survival is thinking and trying to experience something like this. I have to say this, you know, as I go on with this podcast here, you know, this is pretty tough stuff. And I don't want people to think I'm some heartless guy, you know. But if you're in a survival situation, you know, this is crazy stuff, and it's real stuff. And what we're going to be talking about, you know, it's tough to think about. And I'm just telling you the ugly truth. And so I think this is going to be, you know, an interesting podcast.
Right. Yeah. The loss, you know, is something that I've had to. I mean, I write post-apocalyptic fiction, so you know, you're gonna lose a lot of population if we had a national event that rocked our whole nation, grid down scenario, something like that. You know, you're looking at a lot of loss of people within that first 6 months, and some of those people may be people that were really close to you and you loved. And even just a nick on your finger without proper medications and treatments and stuff could be it, you know, that quick. So it's definitely been a difficult one for me to, you know, bridge in my books.
It's hard to process. Just thinking about stuff like this, it's difficult.
It is. So as a person though, like when you lose somebody, what are you know, where are your emotions going?
You know, if you're not in a survival situation, you know, if somebody dies in your life, recently I had the unfortunate pass of my grandmother, you know, and, you know, it was specifically a tough time for my mom, but, you know, it was a pretty sad time. I'll tell you what, it was a pretty down time. But she had dementia, and, you know, I mean, she had it so bad that was, you know, she didn't know who any of us were. And it was really unfortunate, you know. But there's been situations that are much worse than that. Then boom, all of a sudden, some of your family dies out of nowhere. I'll tell you this, you know, there's a family that goes to our co-op, which is like going to school once a week, you know, that the dad was just having a healthy, great life. He was a pastor, you know. He was a good guy, you know.
Right.
Everything was healthy a week ago, and then boom, he died. This just happened. His funeral was just yesterday here, and so, you know, it was a crazy situation. I know the family, and, you know, I can't imagine how difficult that could be.
Right.
You know?
And so, you know, there's a big difference whether you have time to prepare for, like, you see it coming, it's going to happen, we know it's going to happen one day, right? Or, like, boom, this guy was just 40 years old, and now he's gone, and his family's left, and, you know, they have to try and move on through that.
Yeah. But, you know, if we're going into a survival situation, you know, as terrible as this is, you're going to have to expect stuff like this.
Right.
You're going to. All right. You're going to have to embrace yourself for the worst, literally. All right. All right. You're going to have to expect it. You cannot go in thinking that everybody's going to come out okay. All right. If you go in thinking with that mindset, you're not going to survive. You know. And so you're going to have to be ready for something crazy to happen, from your pet dog dying to a brother or a sibling or a family member dying. You know. You're going to have to brace yourself for something bad that's going to happen. You know.
And probably a lot of bad. That's gonna
a lot of bad. It's not going to be easy. And I hate to say this, but you're going to have to move on real fast.
Right.
You know, you can't sit there and pity the death for that long. Now, I mean, it's going to be difficult. I can't explain to you how difficult it's going to be. I mean, I just thinking about it scares me.
Right.
But you're going to have to move on. You know, as terrible. I mean, it could be your closest person in your life. You know, like you could die. You can't mourn over it that long. You know, what movie? What movie was it? It was Maze Runner. You know, I like Maze Runner. I don't know if you've seen Maze Runner. Have you seen?
Oh, I
have you
haven't seen it.
Maze Runner is a great movie. I mean, I like it. It's one of those post-apocalypse movie.
Okay.
Have you read the book?
No, I haven't.
Have you read any of the books? You gotta read the books at least. You know, I think I started reading the first book and that was it. I don't like reading fiction, but the movies, you know, it's really crazy. The post-apocalypse world, the sun like scorched everybody. Like they have something called a flare, which is this crazy disease that's going around. They put these kids in a maze and testing their intelligence for data, trying for humanity's sake. Anyway, these teenagers are in this maze. They're smart enough, and they escape the maze. And when they escape the maze, I gotta skip over all this stuff in between. But anyway, what ultimately results in them trying to go to like practically the other side of the world and trying to reach these people. And while they have these zombie-like creatures that were filled with this disease called the flare, right? And in that process, they killed a few people, few of their buddies, and they saw it. They cried over the death, but they got going real fast, and it was difficult. If you watch that movie, you'll see how difficult it was for them to take that unfortunate death, and they took it very quickly. It was very difficult for them. Sure, it's just a movie, but it's pretty equivalent to real life. Something's going to happen. It did happen. They mourned over it real briefly, but then they hit the road and went going really fast. The whole scene happened in like 3 minutes. I cannot remember. Trying to think who was the guy that died, but anyway.
Right, you just don't have the time. You just don't have the time to sit and mourn.
No, and so I mean,
if you want to survive.
Yeah, if you don't, I mean, you're gonna die too. If you sit there, you're crying. No, I mean, by all means.
Yeah, I watched one called like The Long Road Home or something like that, and I guess my son and I, we got into it like halfway, and then we had to turn it off. We're like, this is almost too it was too depressing. We wanted a happier movie because we're just like hanging out. But his wife had died in the whole event, and he kept like one bullet, for himself kind of thing, and it was pretty. It hit you by the reality strokes. You're just like, oh my gosh. Would you want to live on past that? When you just lost everybody you loved, or
there's going to be moments where you're going to wish you were never born.
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest examples for something like this is Job, the story of Job in the Bible. Job, the book of Job, one of the 66 books of the Bible. Job was likely the very first book written in the Bible. It's an interesting story about Job. I'll go into a little detail about it. So Job arguably was one of the world's richest men at that time. It was after the Great Flood. It's probably at least 400 or 500 years after the flood. But he was one of the world's richest men. He had thousands of animals. He had, I believe, seven sons and 4 daughters. I don't remember the exact number. But he was very wealthy. He had servants among servants. I mean, back then, having livestock was your wealth. And he was a very wealthy man. He had everything going for him. And the devil consults the Lord, and they comes the devil. The Lord allowed the devil to take literally everything away from Job.
Right.
All of his sons, all of his daughters, all of his livestock, all of his servants, all of his wealth disappeared in hours. It was all gone.
Right.
It came down to him and his wife, and I believe his wife actually his wife ditched him. Okay. And that has to be pretty sucky. And then after all that, he could start cursing and blow and just yelling at God. He didn't. He wished he was never born. He said that over and over again.
Right.
But he did. And he kept going on. But little did he know, more trials were going to come, and his health faded away. He had boils on every square inch of his body, and he kept going on. And at the end of it all, he survived, and it all worked out for good. And I bet he's up in heaven now, just dancing about it, and he's probably glad all that.
Right, the trials,
all that happened.
The road that you had to walk to get to where you are, right?
As difficult as it is, ultimately everything turns out for good, according to according to the Lord's purpose, you know.
Right. That was all like the rundown between like, oh, well, Job only loves you because you gave him all this stuff. And the devil telling God, oh, he only loves you because of that, you know. So would he still have faith if you took it all, right?
And he did. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. And then one of my favorite Bible verses is in Job 37:14. A buddy of Job, his name was Elihu. He told Job in 37, I believe it's, Job 37:14. Hearken to this, O Job, stand still and consider the wondrous works of God. And in a survival situation, even in a normal situation, this is a very applicable verse. You have to look at the context of that verse. Obviously, Job lost everything, you know, everything he ever had, his health, his wealth, everything gone, his family gone. And Elihu told him, hey man, you gotta stop pouting, you know, as sucky as it is, you gotta stop pouting, and you got to stand still. And what that means, stop.
Right.
I mean, stop what you're doing. Stop moping around, right? And then sit down and consider all the wondrous works of God. Now, that's a very large variety of things. In my case, it's God's creation. Just seeing the creation of the outdoors and going out there and just enjoying it is very awesome. That's what I consider the wondrous works of God. It could be something else, you know, in your life. Another wondrous work of God. Think about all the good things God's done for you in the past, you know. Think about, he has the right to do whatever he pleases, God does, you know. And so, you know, you got to take that into consideration. So whether you're in a survival situation or not in a survival scenario, you have to think about that verse when something tough happens. You know, think about everything that's good that's happened in your life. That's what that verse is saying. Stop moping around and think about it. Survival situation or not, you know. I think it's a very great verse. So that's Job 37:14. Great verse. So stop moping around. Think about everything that's good. In a survival situation, think about what's good so that it will.
You can get through the bad.
Keep you going. It'll keep you going. You know? Yeah. Just think about everything good, and you'll see that time and time again in movies. You know, like something bad happens, and then they start thinking about something good, and you know, it works out. I'll tell you this one movie, and I think movies are a great influence on the survival industry.
A psychological teacher.
Yeah, and so this is not a survival movie. Arguably one of my favorite movies. It's called We Bought a Zoo. Have you seen that?
No.
It has Matt Damon and Scarlett Johansson. It has nothing to do with survival, but it's based upon a true story. It's a little off according to the book, but I've actually reached out. It's a true story, based upon a true story. I've actually reached out to the main character and asked him on the TV show, but he said no. But his name's Benjamin Mee, and he lost his wife. He had 2 kids, you know, and they moped over it for months. You know, I understand that. I respect that. It's a crazy situation. He lost his wife to cancer, and it's unfortunate.
Right.
And the son moped about it for the longest time. He did really bad in school and stuff. And, you know, the time came when they were like, okay, we got to get going with our life, you know. They ended up buying a zoo. That's where the name comes from.
Oh, you know what? I have seen that one. Yep.
Yeah. It's a great movie. I cry to it every time I watch it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I agree.
It's a great movie. And
it is.
They passed that bad and started focusing on the good. You know, they spent 6 months of moping, and that's, we could say that's their survival time. And then they start focusing on the good, and then boom, they start their own zoo. And then that brings their family closer. It brings new friends. It brings in, you know, Matt Damon, Benjamin Mee in the movie, gets a new friend. And obviously, then that worked out. And then they brought in new friends, and the son met the girl of his dreams, you know. It all worked out, you know.
Yeah, that movie was so cute. And it is. It's an emotional roller coaster.
It's a great movie. And so if they would have only known what they're like, if they would have known what their life would have turned up as at the end when they bought the zoo and how they had all these new friends and everything worked out, and obviously became quite well new zoo. If he would have known that the death of his wife, there would have been obviously that moment of sadness that, you know, he lost his wife, and you that's never going to change, and you're going to have to live with that for the rest of your life. But he would have known how that would have all worked out, you know. I think it would have gotten him on a lot faster, you know. Got past the moment. So a survival scenario, even though that movie's not a survival post-apocalypse type of movie, I think it's one of the things we need to think about. Is like, hey, okay, you know, something good will eventually come out of this, whether we like it or not. Like, it may not be good for me, but it may be good for somebody else.
Right.
And ultimately, it's good for God. You know, everything works out. I can't tell you the sovereignty of God, but everything's going to work out for good. whether you like it or not. And so, I mean, I think getting past a crazy situation, especially in a survival situation, let's say somebody in your family dies, you really got to get going. You know,
Right,
as much as
and
that
so I wanted to talk a little bit about like how we can help other people that might be struggling, having a harder time dealing with that. So I had read this article that explained that, a lot of times when you're in this grieving state, you have difficulty eating and staying hydrated, both of which are really dangerous in a survival situation. So how, if you even have the ability to overcome that in yourself, be aware that those things are going to happen. You have to take care of yourself. But when other people are doing this grieving, you obviously can't control them in any way. But what kind of what kind of hope could you offer them? How are you going to kind of drag them out or provide the assistance? What are you going to do?
Well, I hate to say this, in a survival situation, that's going to be difficult. But in general, real everyday life, you can't go up to them and say, I believe it's like Romans 8:5 or something like that. Everything works together for good. It says it somewhere. I can't remember the exact Bible verse. You can't go up to them and say that because, that's not what they're thinking right now. And it probably won't really
They can't see it right now. They're so hidden in their grief, right?
Exactly. You can't go up to them and say that. Yeah, I would say, ultimately, I would say that'd be wrong for you to do that. But, one of the things you do, I told you about that recent family who had the passing of their father. My mother actually sent them notes. My family attended their funeral, and I believe I know plenty of people who sent them flowers. And I know that's very generic stuff. I mean, that's really all you can do. There's not a whole lot more that you can really do. And if you're in a survival situation, you better, that's. I would say you see a buddy of yours, his wife dies or something, and you're trying to survive whatever a post-apocalypse world. What are you going to do to help your buddy?
Yeah.
It might be good to work side by side with your buddy, trying to survive together. That might be a good idea. It might bring him comfort not to be alone. Have his buddy right by his side, trying to help him get through it. But that's a really impossible question to answer because everybody takes emotions differently. And so.
I like that though, just being because I was like, what would you really say or anything? Sometimes you don't need to say anything, right? You just need to be there with them.
Yep, and I would say the best thing that you can do though is pray for them.
Right.
I think that'd be the best thing you can do.
Either situation.
Ultimately. And you can tell them that you're praying for them. I think that's really the most comforting thing there is, knowing that people care enough to take the time to sit down and pray for you.
What do you think in a survival situation? Do you think that the loss of these loved ones has different implications for women versus men?
Yeah, I would always say that women take more emotions and stuff than guys, and it's just been that way through the centuries. And so, I'm not a girl, obviously. I have no idea how, let's say my dad died, unfortunately, something crazy like that. I have no idea how my mom would react, but I kind of know how I would react. Especially in a survival situation, I'd be like, this is terrible, but we gotta go. I don't know how my mom would respond. So yeah, we have different emotions. And so I know what I would do. I would at least try to practice what I'm teaching here. I would try to get up and move on. As hard as that would be, when everything clears up, that's my time of moping,
Fair enough, right? Yeah. I was going to say, sometimes moms are the ones who are like, okay, we got to just go on because we got to take care of the family and we'll just deal with all this later. And then it can be like horrific later on, like the huge emotional meltdown. Yeah. But sometimes they're like, we got to just, same way with men, I think too. I was kind of thinking like in a survival situation though, like for a woman to have lost her family, it might be her security blanket as well. Like, I'm definitely going to feel less secure if I don't have my man with me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like, if a wife and husband are working together trying to survive a crazy situation, she loses her husband,
Yeah.
That's not going to be good for her by any means whatsoever.
Right.
And I can't tell you what she's going through, and I can't tell you what's going to happen for her. But, it's not going to look pretty for her.
Right, and they could still run the same way with a guy. I mean, if you're the last one alive, it's just you now, and you're kind of screwed. You can't do everything yourself, and but there's definitely, we got to admit, there's some more risk for women versus men in that situation.
It's much more difficult for women in this situation than guys.
Right.
It's not shut down in my mind.
Yeah, you can't just like fit in and be another laborer. It's going to be a different situation.
I know how guys would. I mean, we all act like tough, and I think we would get up and moving pretty fast. I really think so. We would, but with women, I don't know. I can't tell you. And so I mean, it's an impossible situation to explain. So I don't know.
What do you think about different ages?
You know, I would say I'm 60 years old, and I've gone through life, and I've seen other family members die. You know, I think it wouldn't be as tough for me. And so yeah, I think age has a different. Like right now, you know, I mean, in my life, I haven't had like crazy loss in my life. You know,
right.
You know, my grandma just died. You know, but I mean, with no doubt, it's the most difficult death in our family that we've had.
Definitely losing my grandparents was really rough.
So, both my parents are still alive, and then my dad.
Yeah, me too.
Both my dad's parents are alive. You know, and so I mean, you know, I mean, I don't know. With age, I think a 60-year-old would get past faster than somebody who's my age would. But I don't know. I really don't know. And so,
and then again, I was thinking like a security risk, because man, if you're that kid whose parents didn't get you ready, as we talked about in our other interview. Yeah. And now you're all by yourself.
No, I'll go back to our last episode. You know, if you don't teach your kids how to, I don't want to say this too bluntly, but if you don't teach your kids how to survive and you're into survival stuff, I don't want to say you're an idiot, but I mean that's pretty low. You gotta teach your kids, especially if you're into stuff like that. I mean, I'm not expecting for a non-survivalist who has no idea about survival to teach his kids survival. You know. I'm not expecting that because he doesn't know anything about survival. How can he teach his kids something?
Start learning together.
So, I mean,
do it now.
And so I mean, you know, I think if you have kids and you're in a survival situation, you know, you got to embrace the fact that you could lose your kids. You know, you're more likely to use your kid than you know, like a brother that's your age. You know, you're likely to lose a young one or somebody who's in their upper 70s before you.
Well, and that's why I always say like it's so essential to have all the pieces together. So you can't just have like middle-aged people. You've got to have some older people that can help take care of the younger people and like everybody together to make that community happen again. I mean, that's just this, we just don't understand communities anymore because we've gotten so far into technology land, you know, but if you come back to the basic roots of it, you know, all the pieces work together to take care of each other.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the greatest key to, you know, surviving a post-apocalyptic world, which, you know, I mean, when I say stuff like that, you know, what's going to happen, based upon, you know, obviously I believe in God, and I believe it's something called the rapture, it's called the capturing away of the saints, as the Bible calls it, after God calls his, you know, his Christians away, you know. I won't be here for that, you know, but I know plenty of people who will. And so, that when I say post-apocalypse, that's what I am personally referring to is a situation like that. And it's almost impossible. I mean, based upon what the Bible says, it's almost impossible to survive a situation like that, but you're going to try to. And so, I mean,
yeah, the odds are not in your favor.
Yeah, definitely.
Put it that way. I'm like a full-scale national disaster where we did have a grid down for longer than a couple weeks. The odds are not in your favor.
Definitely not. So, I mean, you know, it's difficult stuff to think about. I don't know. And so everybody takes loss differently. And so, but in a survival situation, you better be ready. If you're not ready, you're screwed. Yeah.
Yep. So again, both episodes we've done this season comes down to like prepare for it. Be prepared. Yep.
Be prepared. That's what survival's all about. And prepping, I mean, obviously, being prepared.
Yep. Get psychologically ready as much as you are physically ready and stuff on your shelves ready. Right on, Blake. Well, I've got to get going. We're running a little bit. Well, we're pretty much on time this episode, but you know, we're gonna wrap it up. It's a difficult topic to bridge, definitely. And so basically, we got to go with the suck it up cupcake because you're in a survival situation.
Hey, just like last episode, you know, I said the key point, the one thing that you could take away from the last episode, the same thing as this episode, is that you gotta be ready. You gotta be prepared. And so, one thing you learn from this: be ready.
Yep. Think about it now.
Difficult. Yeah, definitely.
Think about what you do. So.
Yeah.
All right, Blake. Why don't you let everybody know where to find you, and we'll wrap it on up.
Yep, you can check out my website at www.blakealma.com. Alma spelled A-L-M-A. There you'll see the TV show, you'll see the radio show, you'll see some of my books, audiobooks, ebooks. What else is on there? I've got some articles on there, like freelance articles I've written over the past few years, So a bunch of stuff there for you guys, a bunch of survival stuff. Most of my outdoor writing is survival related, because that's my favorite thing to talk about. And the radio show is mostly hunting and fishing related. But on occasion, we'll talk about survival. Like I said, we just had James Hart on the show that aired a few weeks ago. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff on there just for you guys to listen to. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and appreciate it a lot.
Thanks, Blake, so much for coming on the show and sharing your opinions of how to deal with the loss of a loved one in an SHTF situation. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about surviving the death of a loved one in our current society. When we experience the loss of a loved one, it is a personal shock. It's a lot of personal sorrow because you don't have that person in your life anymore. And typically, if you're feeling the death very deeply, it's because that person was a big part of your life. And, it's really difficult to not have them in your life anymore. So, it's definitely a personal loss, personal experience, and not one that you can really share with other people unless that individual was a really big part of their life as well. So when you have the loss of a loved one, it's super important that you have a good network around you, a network of loved ones that can come and help you emotionally, that can just be there with you, just, even if it's just sitting in the same room together. That you can hug, that you can share tears with. So, find people in your life that you can trust. I don't have too many. I have a lot of friends, but I only have a handful of people that I would consider family friends, that I could really, really turn to when the chips were down. And, it's because I put up a kind of a personal wall to kind of protect myself from people that would wish you ill will. There's a lot of different people in this world, and you never know what you're going to get. And so I've kind of streamlined, who I would place any kind of trust in. And that includes my family, honestly. So, that's kind of my shtick about, having the social network, that it is so important to make sure that you do find friends. And you find these friends that you can trust with all your heart and all your might, because you're really going to need them when these types of situations happen. So, we left immediately. We found out that my father-in-law passed away on Mother's Day, and we left that next Monday afternoon. It was just get a car, let's go. We got to go. We got to go and be there for my mother-in-law. We'll love her to death. I wish she was so much closer, but it was never a question. It was just, we've got to be there for her. So that's what we did. And it's important for you to have those people in your life. Another big piece to this puzzle is financial. The last thing you want to deal with when you're dealing with the loss of a loved one is financial BS, basically, My father-in-law, he took really, really good care of us and the whole family. And he was very, very stubborn guy. And he didn't like to talk too much about what was going on, with monies and things like that. So I was brought in because I have a business degree and whatnot. And so he wanted me to understand what was going on financially with the family. And he showed me everything. And like one day, boom, here it is. Here's the code to the safe. Here's all this, blam, blam, blam. And it's the same thing as, you know, if you learn a new move in martial arts and you don't practice it, then you forget and you don't know. So it's important that you have a partner, you have someone in your life that you've been talking with, that you've been showing how you pay your bills, how you deal with money, where money comes from, where it goes, what's expected, you know, just so that if you were to, God forbid, leave this earth, that somebody else can understand exactly where you were at. So a lot of times in families, one person kind of owns that role. I know in my family, it's me. And I try to, you know, keep my husband abreast of how I do everything so that if something were to happen to me, he could take over and understand what was happening with our financial situation. It can be a huge shock if you've just lost your loved one and now you have to figure out exactly how everything went as far as money goes. And it's not an easy thing. You think it might be, but it's really not. And you need to understand that well before you lose that person. So if you have one person in your household who's kind of your financial manager, you need to have a backup. You know, same as with our MAG groups, you need to have a primary and a secondary, somebody else that can step in the case that that person's absent. Even if that person is hospitalized or something like that, you know, the bills still need to be paid. The collectors are still going to come to get their money, and you need to understand how that works. So that's kind of my second piece that goes along with this, is understanding what happens with the money in your household. The next thing that I want to talk about is record keeping. So depending on what your family owns, how big the estate is, you know, what happens, there's many things that are going to need to be altered once that person is gone. For example, the title to any properties is going to have the name removed. If you have any type of mineral rights or anything like that, the names are going to have to be changed. Insurance policies, the names are going to have to be changed. You know, all kinds of things that you own and you own as a couple, now that name is going to have to be removed. So, you know, it's kind of a good idea to have like a list or a folder of all those things so that, you know, because you're so emotionally wrecked when you lose this loved one that you might not be thinking on all cylinders at that point. So if you have it kind of outlined for yourself before that happens, you're going to be in a much better position. Now, this is really tough. I'm going to tell you honestly, I used to sell life insurance, and the worst thing that I had to do, well, I used to sell all kinds of insurance, but I used to sell life insurance as well. And the worst thing that you have to do is call somebody and be like, have you thought of what's going to happen to your family if you die? It is really, really an awkward thing, and something you know, honestly, I don't want to think about. I don't want to think about losing my husband ever. So, you know, it's a difficult thing, but it's something that you really need to face. So all of those things that are going to need to be altered or changed, you know, just have a list on hand so that you're just kind of preparing yourself to handle that, even when you have these crazy emotions flying around and all of this stuff you have to take care of. And this is just one more thing on top of it all. So my next point would be life insurance policies. Life insurance policy is a great thing to have. As a prepper, as a survivalist, you know, we got to think about our financials as well. And I always tell everybody, you know, you're all preppers. You keep a spare tire in your car and you have an insurance policy, right? So you are a prepper and you're preparing for that monetarily. Well, we're preparing for it in even bigger ways. However, life insurance is something that's usually overlooked because we don't want to think about our loved ones dying. These policies can get pretty confusing, whether you have a term policy, a whole life policy, and then they're going to be, you know, trying to investigate you for fraud or anything like that along the way. It can get really sticky, but it's a really good idea to have some type of a life insurance policy in place because it will help you out financially. That being said, these things don't happen instantly. And this is the biggest point that my mother-in-law wanted me to share with my listeners. If you're older, if you're a retirement age, and you are relying upon Social Securities and a pension, there are going to be hiccups in that process as soon as your loved one dies. So Social Security literally will remove the money from your account that they've paid out to a person who is recently deceased as soon as they find out about it. It's a horrific thing. Happened to my mother-in-law. And, it just creates so much more stress on top of everything. So Social Security will literally pull that money from you and then not reissue it to a survivor beneficiary until they have a death certificate and things like that in place. So you're going to experience a financial hiccup there. Also, pension, depending on the pension company, they may do the same thing. They might physically pull that money until it is reissued to the survivor of the beneficiary. So be aware of that. Some companies will allow you to deposit that, and then they will just adjust the next payment for whatever happened, So you have to really figure out how is that going to work with a pension payment when you lose your loved one. Even if you have a life insurance policy in place, it's not going to pay out like immediately. You have to get the death certificate. All these things take time. It takes like 3 weeks at least to get the death certificate, depending on the city that you're a part of. And so, like I say, all these things take time. And if you don't have extra financial resources in place to cover your finances while all this stuff is adjusting, it can be really, really hard to handle. You have mortgage payments that are due. You can't miss those mortgage payments. If you ever want to refinance or anything like that, a missed mortgage payment is a major red flag. So you want to you want to be able to pay your bills. You want to be able to put food in your mouth. You want to be able to continue on with life as you know it. And with the, hiccup of the Social Security money coming in, with a hiccup of pension money coming in, with the delay on a life insurance policy payout, this can all get really, really rocky. So, if you're not financially able to, have an account that is set aside specifically for emergency money of that type of situation, then make sure that you have some extra credit cards or something like that don't have any money on them, so that if that happens, you can use those and then pay them off once the monies come in from the life insurance policy or the Social Security or the pensions start picking back up. Super duper important to realize that these things are going to happen because, like I say, you are just in this emotional mess, and now you've got financial issues to deal with on top of that, which can be really, really hard to deal with even if you weren't dealing with something like a death of a loved one. So it's really important to do those things. Now, if you're not on Social Security or have a pension payment coming in, you're not of retirement age yet, the life insurance policy is even more critical because you're going to lose your partner or your, financial partner. And, if that person is the primary breadwinner, then you've just lost all that income that person usually brings to your household. Even if, that person that passes away has been the home caretaker, maybe taking care of children at home, taking care of the household, all the things that they normally do, you're going to lose that. And that can be a big financial shock as well, because maybe now you have to put your kids into daycare while you're at work earning money. And daycare is really, really expensive nowadays. So bottom line is that, even though we don't want to think about life insurance policies and things like that, we need to have them in place. It's so very important to protect your loved ones if something like that were to happen. And the last thing they need to deal with when they're dealing with the loss of you is these financial upsets. So realize that these things happen. Try to think this through. We're, as survivalists and preparedness people, we try to think through as many scenarios as we can. And oftentimes, we focus on like the big collapse. And I do, because that's my fiction books. So, I try to focus there as well. However, we have personal disasters that happen every day in our lives, and we have to be prepared for those as well. So I just wanted to kind of share with you some of my experiences in dealing with the death of a loved one. You know, that social network is so important, that people understand the finances of the household, somebody else besides just the primary person who's taking care of it, that you keep a file, you keep a list of all the things that would need to be adjusted if you lose that loved one, that you have a life insurance policy in place, and that you realize that if you are relying upon a Social Security or a pension payment, that there are going to be hiccups in that process. And you need to realize that ahead of time so you can have the financial means set up ahead of time to handle that problem. So I really, really hope that none of you have to experience this anytime soon. But I wanted to share and actually, like I say, my mother-in-law really, really encouraged me to do this type of article because she was completely taken off guard. You know, she lost her husband. They were going to celebrate, you know, their anniversary here on the 20th. And, you know, my father-in-law had medical issues and he was 70 years old, and we all knew the day would come, but we didn't expect it to come so quickly by any means. But she was taken totally off guard by all the things that need to be done now that he's not here anymore. And so it would have been hindsight's 20/20 always. And so that's why I wanted to share this with you, because it can give us all a jump on what you need to do, what you need to have in place, and what you need to be aware of should you lose your loved one. So a little bit of doom and gloom today, but it's, you know, really important to have those things in place. And so that's why we really needed to talk about it. Well, now that that's all over with, we had our whole surviving the loss of a loved one episode, which came up kind of crazy timing, how that worked out. You know, I want to thank you for coming, listening to the show. I hope you're enjoying the book. I really encourage you to head on over to patreon.com and become a contributor of the website. That's www.patreon.com/Changing Earth, and you can become a contributor, have access to all that free info. And once again, thank you, Blake, for coming on the show and sharing your opinions on the loss of a loved one. And I hope that you got lots of good information out of my experiences. So until next time, remember, dream, survive, thrive.
Thank you for joining Sara for this episode of the Changing Earth podcast. Don't forget to pick up your copy of Day After Disaster, Without Land, The Walls of Freedom, and Battle for the South at www.author.sarafhathaway.com. If you love Sara's books and this podcast, please head over to Amazon or iTunes and let everyone know by leaving a review.